Individual provided us with a list of Russian sources in the US.
These are enemies of the state.
Is our national security compromised?
Without a question.
We demand justice, and I mean vindictive retribution.
I don't know who you people are.
Jo is sitting
That's
in a
who we
room
are.
surrounded by armed men who think they own her. But here's the part nobody is talking about. Jo already knows something they don't want her to know. She already knows who betrayed her. And she is not going to fight her way out of that room. She's going to think her way out of it. If you believe Jo's escape in episode 5 will be loud, fast, and physical, I think you are about to be wrong. Because the real escape has already started, and it is happening inside her head. Let's slow down for a second and really look at where Jo is right now. She is captured. She is surrounded. She is being watched every second of every day. On the surface, this looks like the worst position she could possibly be in. But Jo is not an ordinary prisoner. She is a trained operative who has spent her entire career learning how enemies think, how enemies move, and how enemies make mistakes. So when the Russians look at Jo, they see a captive. But what if Jo is looking right back at them, and what she sees is an opportunity? That single difference in perspective could completely change how episode 5 plays out. Here is the theory I want to build with you today. Jo already knows who betrayed her. Not with total certainty, not with hard proof, but with the kind of instinct that trained operatives develop after years of reading people. And that instinct is the real key to her escape. Because Jo's escape will not begin with a punch or a stolen weapon. It will begin the moment she stops reacting to her captivity and starts studying it. Think about what captivity actually gives Jo. Time. Hours and hours of forced stillness. Most prisoners would see that as torture. Jo sees it as data collection. Every guard who walks past her cell is a data point. Every conversation she overhears is a data point. Every mistake, every hesitation, every nervous glance between her captors is a data point. And Jo has been trained to notice all of it, even when she looks like she is barely paying attention. This is where the psychological escape really begins. Jo is not going to try to overpower 10 armed men. That is not how professionals escape captivity. That is how amateurs get themselves killed. Instead, Jo is going to do something far more dangerous to her captors. She is going to make them believe they have already won. She is going to let them think she is exhausted. She is going to let them think she has stopped resisting. She is going to let them think the interrogation is working. And underneath all of that performance, she is going to keep watching, keep listening, and keep building a picture of exactly who she is dealing with. Now here is where the betrayal theory connects directly to the escape theory. And this is the part I think most people are missing. Jo is not just watching her captors to plan a physical escape. She is watching them to confirm something she already suspects. Because somewhere in the back of her mind, Jo is asking herself a question that should terrify her. How did the Russians know where to find me? How did they know my exact routine? How did they know the exact moment I would be alone and vulnerable? Those are not small details. Those are the kind of details that only someone close to the operation would know, and once Jo starts asking that question, she cannot stop. Every interaction with her captors becomes a test. If they ask her about a specific operation, she is not just answering, she is calculating. She is asking herself, how would they know to ask about that particular mission? If they mention a name she recognizes, she is not panicking, she is filing it away. Because Jo understands something most people never have to learn. The questions an enemy asks you can reveal exactly what they already know. And what they already know can reveal exactly who told them. This is why I believe Jo already knows, or at least strongly suspects, who betrayed her before episode 5 even ends. Not because someone confesses, not because she finds a hidden document, but because she has spent every hour of her captivity quietly assembling a pattern, and patterns do not lie. A person who studies human behavior for a living does not need a signed confession. She needs consistency. She needs to notice that the Russians seem to know things they should not know, things that only a small circle of people back home could have access to. Let's talk about why this matters so much for how Jo behaves in the second half of the episode. If Jo suspects there is a leak, then her entire relationship with rescue changes. A normal hostage wants to be found as fast as possible. Jo is not a normal hostage. If Jo believes someone inside her own organization compromised her location, then the people coming to rescue her are no longer automatically safe. They could be walking directly into a trap that was built using information that came from inside the CIA itself. And if that is true, then Jo's priority is not just getting home. Her priority becomes figuring out whether going home is even safe. This is the psychological weight that I think defines episode 5. Jo is fighting 2 battles at the same time, and only one of them is visible. The visible battle is against the Russians who are holding her. The invisible battle is against the growing certainty that someone she trusted is responsible for putting her here. And the second battle is far more dangerous, because you cannot fight betrayal the same way you fight an enemy soldier. You cannot see it coming. You cannot predict where it will strike next. All you can do is prepare yourself to survive it when it finally becomes undeniable. Now let's get into how this psychological escape might actually unfold, because I think the details matter here. Jo is not going to attempt anything dramatic while she is under constant, direct observation. That would be reckless, and Jo does not do reckless. Instead, she is going to wait for a moment where her captor's guard naturally drops. That moment is most likely to happen during a transfer, when Jo is being moved from one location to another. Movement creates chaos. Movement creates gaps in communication. Movement creates the kind of confusion that a trained operative can exploit without ever raising a weapon. But here is the twist I do not think enough people are considering. Jo might not use that moment to run. She might use it to test her theory about who betrayed her. Imagine this. During a moment of confusion, Jo manages to overhear a piece of communication she was never supposed to hear. A name, a code phrase. A detail that only makes sense if someone on the American side has been feeding information to the enemy. In that moment, Jo's escape stops being about freedom. It becomes about confirmation. She now has to decide whether to use this opportunity to disappear immediately, or to stay just long enough to gather one more piece of the puzzle, even though staying could cost her everything. This is the kind of decision that defines a character like Jo. Most people, once they see a chance to escape, take it without hesitation. Jo is not most people. Jo has spent her entire career prioritizing the mission over her own safety, and I think that instinct does not disappear just because she is the one in danger this time. If Jo genuinely believes that uncovering the identity of the traitor is more important than her own immediate safety, she might make the terrifying choice to stay in danger a little longer. Just to be sure, let's talk about what happens if Jo does eventually escape physically, because I do not think that is where her story ends. I think it is where a new kind of tension begins. Picture Jo finally free. She is alone. She has no weapon, no communication device, and no idea exactly where she is. For a normal person, this would be terrifying in a straightforward way. Survive, find help, get home. But for Jo, freedom brings a much darker problem. She now has to decide who she can trust. And if she believes there is a traitor inside her own organization, then trust is no longer something she can give easily, not even to the people sent to rescue her. Imagine the moment Jo finally sees an American rescue team approaching. A normal hostage would run toward them without a second thought. Jo hesitates, because Jo knows something most people never have to think about. Enemy intelligence services are capable of creating convincing false identities. They can imitate uniforms, imitate radio codes, imitate the exact behavior of a real rescue team. So instead of running toward safety, Jo does something almost nobody would expect. She watches. She waits. She studies the team from a distance, looking for the small details that cannot be faked, the tiny behaviors that only genuine trained American operatives would display. Only once she is satisfied does she finally step forward. That single choice tells you everything about how deeply this betrayal theory has already changed Jo by this point in the story. She is not just physically escaping captivity. She is escaping the assumption that home automatically this traitor could actually be. And that psychological shift might be the most important transformation Jo goes through against the entire season. What if the leak is not intentional at all? What if someone close to the operation made an innocent mistake, a careless conversation, a compromised device, a moment of carelessness that accidentally gave the enemy exactly what they needed? If that is the case, then Jo is not just hunting a villain. She is hunting a mistake, and mistakes are much harder to identify than deliberate betrayal, because the person responsible might not even know what they did. This possibility makes Jo's psychological journey even more painful. Because if the leak was accidental, then there is no clean villain to blame. No satisfying confrontation where Jo finally exposes the guilty party. Instead, Jo might have to sit with the uncomfortable truth that someone she cares about, someone she has worked alongside for years, is responsible for her captivity without ever meaning to be. That kind of realization does not create anger in the way a deliberate betrayal would. It creates something more complicated, a mixture of grief and suspicion that Jo has to carry quietly, because accusing an innocent mistake of being intentional sabotage could destroy relationships that matter to her. Let's shift focus for a moment to Caitlin, because I think her role in this theory is just as important as Jo's. While Jo is inside enemy territory, piecing together the truth from fragments of conversation, Caitlin is on the outside, trying to manage an entirely different kind of pressure. She has to organize a rescue. She has to answer to people above her. And if there is even a small possibility that the leak came from inside her own team, she has to consider the terrifying option that she might be looking directly at the person responsible without knowing it. Caitlin's challenge is not just tactical. It is deeply personal, because trusting the wrong person during this operation could put Jo in even greater danger. This creates a fascinating parallel between the two women. Jo is trying to figure out who betrayed her from inside enemy captivity, using nothing but observation and instinct. Caitlin is trying to figure out the same thing from outside, using resources, communication, and organizational knowledge. If both of them arrive at different conclusions, or if one of them suspects someone the other trusts completely, the result could be one of the most tense confrontations of the entire season, and it would have nothing to do with the Russians at all. Now, let's talk about why this psychological escape theory fits so naturally with everything Lioness has built up until this point. This show has never been about simple military action. It has always been about the cost of secrecy, the weight of loyalty, and the impossible choices operatives have to make when the mission and their own humanity pull in opposite directions. A physical escape scene might look exciting on the surface, but it would not carry the same emotional weight as watching Jo slowly realize that the danger she is in was never just about the Russians. The real danger was always closer to home. Let's also consider the emotional cost this theory places on Jo once she finally does get out. If Jo returns home carrying the suspicion that someone she trusted betrayed her, she cannot simply go back to normal. She cannot walk back into meetings, briefings, and missions acting as if nothing happened. Every familiar face becomes a question mark. Every casual comment becomes something she has to analyze. That is an exhausting way to live. And it could completely reshape how Jo interacts with the people around her for the rest of the season. This is why I believe the real climax of episode 5 will not be a dramatic firefight. It will be a quiet, devastating moment where Jo finally puts the pieces together. Maybe it happens during a conversation that seems ordinary on the surface. Maybe someone says something slightly wrong, a detail that does not match what they claim to know, or a reaction that comes a second too late. And in that single moment, Jo understands. She does not need a confession. She does not need proof that would hold up anywhere else. She only needs her own certainty, and for someone with Jo's training, certainty is often more than enough. So here is where I land on this theory heading into episode 5. Jo's escape will not be defined by how fast she runs or how many obstacles she overcomes physically. It will be defined by what she learns while she is trapped, how carefully she hides what she knows, and how she decides to use that knowledge once she is finally free. The real tension is not whether Jo survives her captivity. It is whether Jo can survive what she discovers about the people who were supposed to protect her. And if this theory is correct, then the rescue in episode 5 is not the end of Jo's story. It is the beginning of a much more dangerous chapter, one where the biggest threat Jo faces is no longer wearing a Russian uniform. It is someone standing right beside her, someone she has trusted for years, someone who has no idea that Jo already knows exactly what they did. So now I want to hear your take. Do you think Jo already suspects who betrayed her, or do you think this revelation is still waiting to be discovered later in the season? And if Jo does figure it out during her captivity, do you think she will confront that person immediately? Or do you think she will keep the secret to herself and wait for the right moment to strike? Drop your theory in the comments, because if Jo really has been building this case against a traitor this entire time, then episode 5 might not just be about her escape. It might be the moment the real war inside Lioness finally begins.